What if the thing that will not let you sleep tonight is not noise, but a quiet, persistent listening, the sort of listening your soul keeps for a true king? Lay your head. Let your shoulders drop. For a little while, let me be a steady voice beside you. We will fall asleep with John in our ears, and Isaiah as the lantern in our hands. If this reading helps you find rest, consider subscribing so we can meet like this again. Tonight I will not hurry you. I will not tell you what to do. I offer a map. Isaiah's visions as a way through the dark, and John's gospel as the place where those visions meet a living presence. You do not need to fix everything before sleep. You only need a safe path back to the heart that can rest. Isaiah shows us the terrain: throne room and ruin, judgment and mercy, remnant and restoration. And John points to the traveler who walks through that landscape and makes it a home. Isaiah was a seer. He lived in a time when kingdoms trembled and cities feared for their future. His voice moves between sudden, sharp warnings and a tenderness that almost cradles the listener. Sometimes he speaks like thunder. Sometimes he speaks like a hand on a forehead. John hears Isaiah's scenes and listens for the one who embodies them. The word who comes, the light that arrives in darkness, the shepherd who gathers, the servant who bears suffering so that life might be open to us. Keep that promise close. Isaiah will be our map. John will be our companion. Settle into the rhythm of the breath. Let your thinking slow as you let your attention follow a few clear signposts. First, a throne and holiness. Second, our brokenness, named plainly. Third, judgment, but not without mercy. Fourth, a small remnant, held and kept. Fifth, a servant Messiah who both suffers and restores. You will hear short phrases from Isaiah, then a quiet reply from John's witness, as if two old friends are talking low beside a lamp. There's no rush. Let the images come as if by a slow wave. Listen for the first vision. Isaiah begins in the house of the Lord, with a sense of being undone by what he sees. He comes near, and the scene is overwhelming. A throne lifted high, the room full of an otherness that trembles. The prophet's first breath in the vision is taken away by the weight of holiness. This is a holiness that purges, that strips away what is not true. He sees seraphim, creatures that cry aloud, naming God as entirely other, holy beyond our measures, holy enough to make us confess the smallness of our attempts to be righteous. John hears that same tension, the absolute otherness of God that nonetheless comes near. His gospel opens with a claim that the eternal Word, the source and reason of all things, drew close and entered our world. John says the light shines in the darkness, and that light is not snuffed out. In the silence between Isaiah's throne vision and John's opening line, there is both a tremor and an embrace. God's presence exposes what we cannot bear, and at the same time invites us to look up. Hear Isaiah's witness in a few quiet lines about the throne and the cry that meets it. Imagine the sound circling the room. Notice how that holiness does not stay distant. It reaches. It calls. If your conscience is restless tonight, listen to the way the prophet stands before what is pure, and because of that purity, begins to name his own state honestly. There is no polishing, no pious gloss. The moment we see the absolute purity of God, we see ourselves as we are. John answers that sight with a light that enters the darkest corners where we live. He speaks not only of encountering God's majesty, but of the way the Word enfleshed meets the fragile, ordinary places of our days. You do not have to hide your fatigue. The light knows where you are tired. The throne does not repulse the smallness of your night. It makes room for it by revealing what is true and what is not. Now breathe and allow the image to sink. A throne, a cry that names holiness, and a light that will not be overcome. Let that soak in without argument. Rest in the fact that God's holiness is not a distant standard to measure you against. It is the context in which true healing begins. From holiness to brokenness, the prophet moves quickly. Isaiah does not linger in ritual phrases. He names failure with a directness that is almost tender, because naming is the doorway to change. He speaks of corruption in simple terms, a people who have turned from the life they were given. leaders who have neglected justice, hearts that have been hardened by habit. The words are blunt but not cruel. They are diagnostic, like a physician who points out infection before it can be treated. When Isaiah bids us to come and reason, come into a plain speech with God, John leans into the same posture of invitation. He tells us of a love that sent the Son into the world not to condemn, but to offer life. Where Isaiah lays out the mess plainly, so we do not pretend it is small, John frames the arrival of the Word as the decisive response of God, not an evasive answer, but an entrance into our mess so it can be healed from within. Listen now to a small turn of Isaiah's speech. A call to wrestle honestly with what is true. The prophet offers a hard grace. Confess before the light, and something unexpected happens. A renewal begins. In that same breath, remember John's testimony that belief is not a mere abstract assent. To believe, in John's sense, is to trust that the one who was present at creation has reached into the broken places and is inviting us into a new kind of belonging. Let these two voices balance you. Isaiah's naming of failure does not leave you exposed. It points you to the hands that will gather. John's light does not dismiss the seriousness of sin. It walks into the field where sin has made its home and begins to replant. You are allowed to be tender with this. You do not have to have all the answers. It is enough to sit with the images and let them reshape how you breathe. Now we move to judgment and mercy. Isaiah's warnings are often startling in their honesty. There is consequence, a sense that moral reality matters. Yet almost always, immediately following the warning, Isaiah offers consolation. The prophet's voice is like a call and a comforting hand at once. The judgment named is not mere punishment. It is part of a process that leads toward restoration. Isaiah names the fractures because they are the first cracks through which healing can come. John hears that and reframes it in the person of Jesus. The one who comes to set things right is also the one who takes the risk of coming into brokenness without condemning. The Word is not a cosmic judge poised to destroy. The Word is a presence that draws out the truth, that faces the cruelty of our failures and answers with life. There is accountability, yes, but there is also a profound pleading to be found. In John, judgment and mercy are not opposites, but companions. Like two arms that gather a child who has wandered. Consider Isaiah's soothing voice in the passages that call for comfort. Hear how the prophet instructs us to prepare the way, to lift valleys and lower mountains of pride so that a gentle truth may enter. These are images of leveling and smoothing so that arrival is possible. Imagine the road being made straight, as if the landscape of your anxieties were being tenderly reshaped for a safe approach. And then recall John's words about the Word sent into the world, not to condemn, but to bring life through belief. That belief is not a clever idea or an anxious checklist. It is the resting posture of a heart that trusts the presence of the one who knows every wound and yet offers a life no wound can finally erase. When you feel judged by reality, by consequences, or by the truth of what you have done, let John's voice remind you that God's engagement with judgment is never the last word. The last word is life. Breathe with that thought. Allow the tension of accountability to relax into the tenderness of mercy. Imagine a road being smoothed before you, a gentle hand lowering the stone so that your feet can travel without stumbling. The map is not a set of threats. It is a guide toward a place where truth and healing meet. Now we begin to turn toward a motif that runs through Isaiah like a quiet current, the remnant. Isaiah often speaks of a small, preserved group, a faithful handful, who survive ruin and become the seed of restoration. The remnant is not a boast. It is a fragile, precious staying alive that depends not on human strength but on God's promise. It is emblematic of hope. Even when it seems everything has crumbled, there is a preserved line through which future life will come. John listens and hears in that remnant the pattern of the small community of believers, those who receive the Word and are born again. He uses the language of birth and abiding, of new life springing up in those who welcome the light. The remnant is both a personal and communal image. It is the small yes that refuses to be silenced, and it is the quiet congregation that keeps watch through the night. Picture a vine that looks cut back and near dead, yet beneath the surface a root holds to life. That is the remnant. You may feel small in your faith tonight, but size is not the criterion. Faithfulness is measured by the willingness to remain when all else slips away. Isaiah's promises of restoration always hinge on that seed, a trust preserved and tended. John then reframes that seed in the person who comes to be the true vine, the one who invites a branch to abide and thus receive life that is not subject to our fluctuations. In the soft hours, when doubts come like cold drafts, remember the remnant. Let it be a small, steady light in your hand, not to boast, but to reassure. You are not required to perform a grand act of faith. You are invited to keep the small, humble yes that remains when the rest has fallen away. We move now toward the servant songs, the texts in Isaiah that look forward to a figure who both suffers and vindicates. These are not abstract prophecies we can tuck away. They are portraits that point to someone who will carry suffering deliberately, that will make suffering a means to healing rather than a finality. The servant is depicted with ordinary features and extraordinary purpose, a quiet endurance that does not surrender to bitterness, a willingness to accept the pain that brings release to others. John rings this in a different key. He identifies that servant as the one who is also the Word, who enters into flesh and lets himself be known in the vulnerabilities of human life. For John, the servant is no distant figure. He is the immediate presence who heals by being present, who redeems by giving himself. The suffering of the servant is not vindictive suffering but vicarious and purposive, a way through which the human condition is embraced and transformed. Listen as Isaiah unfolds a few lines that speak of a servant's quiet dignity, a face marred more than any other, a grief that is taken on behalf of many. Let the words sink as images, not as puzzles to solve. Picture the servant's silence in the courtroom of the world, the way his pain becomes a bridge over the chasm between death and life. Then hear John's echo, the Word made flesh who is recognized by those who have eyes to see the light. As these images come, you might feel tenderness, or you might feel the sting of memory. Either is welcome. Allow the servant's endurance to stand in for yours, a willingness to be vulnerable, to accept that the path through grief can become the path to restoration. This is not a promise that every hurt will vanish in the blink of an eye. It is a theological assurance that suffering, when embraced by love, does not have the final say. Now I will read to you, slowly, a few scriptural images that carry these themes. Let the words fall like soft rain. Let the images be simple. Do not rush to interpret them. Receive them as a listener who comes to rest. I saw the Lord seated on a high and lofty throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood seraphim, each having 6 wings. They called to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. Hear the awe in that scene. Notice how it both humbles and draws the prophet's heart nearer to God's reality. There is trembling, but it is a trembling that opens the mouth to a truer confession. And yet the Lord says, Come now, let us reason together. Though your sins be like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall become like wool. These words are not flippant. They demand honesty and then offer a sweeping mercy, an invitation into cleansing that does not deny the reality of stains. The act of being named keeps us from pretending we are unscarred. The offer that follows keeps us from despair. Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem, and cry to her that her warfare is ended, that her iniquity is pardoned, for she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. Here is reassurement after confession, a reaching toward consolation that is too often omitted in a hurried faith. There is a voice telling us that forgiveness is not thin air, but a real reversal of burden. Behold my servant, he shall bring forth justice to the nations. He will not cry aloud, or lift up his voice, or make it heard in the street. The servant's manner is gentle, not loud. His power is not in coercion, but in fidelity. This is not a hero who conquers by spectacle. This is one who conquers by steadfast love that endures insult and affliction. And then the stark lines that pierce the heart. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. By his wounds we are healed. These words name suffering as real, bodily, costly. They also name the paradox. From that suffering comes a doorway to healing. Let the language wash over you, and do not try to domesticate its mystery. John hears these images and names their resonance. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. He positions the servant, the suffering one, within the frame of the Word who penetrates our world and brings forth life. The two testimonies, Isaiah's portrait and John's witness, complete one another like two hands clasping. As you listen, allow your pulse to slow. Let the images settle into the places they touch you. Perhaps a memory surfaces, a moment of loss, a night of shame, a long fatigue you have carried. You do not have to solve it. Let it be present as the text is present, named and not abandoned. This is the part of the night where stories begin to deepen and the map becomes a lived route. We have walked through a throne room. We have felt the naming of our failures. We have heard the twin notes of justice and mercy, and we have met the quiet servant who carries suffering. The path now turns toward a longer, quieter reading, passages that will unfold slowly and allow the images to work beneath thought, like tide working on a shoreline. Before we step onto that longer stretch, breathe with me for a moment. Let the last few images clasp your attention. A holy throne that draws the heart into honest seeing, words that call us to come and be cleansed, a comfort that follows justice, a remnant that holds. In John's witness, this all culminates in the one who is both word and light, the one who enters our world to reweave the torn fabric of life. We will now begin a sustained time of hearing, passages from Isaiah intertwined with brief points of John's simple witness. Do not rush. Allow the cadence of the words to be slow enough that your mind can follow them without grabbing. The purpose is not to answer every question, but to let the gospel speak quietly into the parts of you that are too tired to argue. Listen as the landscape shifts. Isaiah moves from images of holiness and judgment to pictures of desert places made like gardens, of valleys lifted and mountains made low, of roads prepared for a coming presence. John will put a single light-bright phrase in between, so you never lose the sense that these ancient roads point forward to a person who walks them. The reading will be gentle, almost whispering. Keep breathing. Keep the body loose. We begin with a voice of comfort, a pronouncement that is meant to steady a frightened people. Comfort, comfort my people, the text repeats, as if God leans in twice to make sure we hear. Then the voice asks us to prepare a way in the wilderness, to make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Picture the wild places in your life, the parts that feel barren or exposed, and imagine, for a moment, a way being made straight through them. Not by your effort alone, but by a steady hand that reshapes the landscape so the one who is coming can be met without stumbling. John hears that preparation and responds, "The Word became flesh and made a home among us," so that the preparation is not merely a metaphor, but a present action. The road is being made in and through our lives by a presence who knows the terrain intimately because he has walked it. Now let your breathing slow further. Imagine the road, the smoothing of valleys, and the small, faithful ones who continue along that path. As the reading continues, you may feel your eyelids growing heavy. That is the body agreeing with a deeper truth. You are allowed to rest now. The scriptures we have read are not a list of demands. They are a hand steadying you as you cross from wakefulness into sleep. We will continue on this road together, following Isaiah's map and listening for John's lamp. The words will not fix everything at once. They will, however, provide a steady pattern: sight, naming, invitation, presence. These are enough for tonight. Let them do their slow work. Now, as you breathe, here is the next line that turns our attention from sheer warning toward the promise of restoration. The voice in the prophet speaks of a shoot from the stump, a branch that will rise even when everything looks cut back. This imagery is small and tender, life that returns where life seemed impossible. John hears this and points to a new kind of birth, an entrance into a life that is both present and future. Hold on to that image of the branch. Let it be the small light you carry as we edge into the deeper reading. The road straightens. The lantern of the gospel keeps a soft glow at your side. Allow the text to breathe with you as we move from one image to the next. Hold the image of that branch for a moment. Imagine it small, stubborn, pushing through dust toward light. Let your breathing match it, small and steady. The road straightens. The lantern of the gospel keeps a soft glow at your side. Allow the text to breathe with you as we move from one image to the next. Isaiah turns the scene now to the coming of a new order, the reweaving of a torn world. He speaks of a shoot from the stump, a spirit of wisdom and understanding, counsel and might. Hear the words as if they were spoken to the quiet parts of you. A shoot shall come out from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. Think of a life beginning where life seemed ended. Think of a pulse reawakening under a frozen surface. John hears this as the work of the Word who makes home among us. The seed of promise becomes presence. Listen to a few lines that follow this tender promise. Let them fall slowly. A little child shall lead them. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat. There is an almost impossible gentleness in the picture, enemies resting beside one another, danger transformed into peace. Imagine that peace not as a naive wish, but as the world rearranged by a presence who changes the rules of fear. John's witness reaches back to this hope and says simply, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it." Keep that simple phrase at hand. Let it be the small flame beside the branch. The world may still feel complicated. Your heart may still carry weight. But the promise is that the light persists. There is a steady illumination that does not tire. Now the prophet speaks of paths made straight, of valleys uplifted, of rough places smoothed. Hear Isaiah's voice. Prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the wilderness a highway for our God. Picture the wild parts of your life softened, not by frantic fixing, but by a careful hand that shapes the path so arrival is possible. John then says that the Word became flesh. Hear those two together. Preparation and presence. Something draws near, and the way is being made within you and around you. Breathe. Let your day's complicated edges blur a little. Allow the rhythm of the words to lull the part of you that needs to be heard. You are allowed to rest even as the landscape of your life rearranges slowly. We move into a passage of consolation, the prophet's voice lowering to a tenderness that almost sounds like a lullaby. Comfort, comfort my people, he repeats. Consider that repetition as a parent might repeat a soothing phrase to a child who cannot settle. Isaiah's voice leans in twice because some truths need hearing more than once. The assurance that follows is not a dismissal of trouble, but a promise that trouble is not the last word. John echoes this by pointing to one who is near, one whose life is the very presence of God among us. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Those are not arguments. They are invitations. The gospel invites the weary to rest in a company that knows the cost of being human. As these images sink, the prophet shifts to the figure of the servant. The servant's way is not loud. It is not the way of triumph that seeks spectacle. Instead, the servant moves through suffering and silence, and by that movement brings healing. Hear Isaiah's measured lines. He was despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. There is no attempt to sweeten the pain. It is named for what it is. And then the text offers the paradox. By his wounds we are healed. Let that paradox rest beside you, like a cool cloth on a fevered brow. Healing comes through presence that bears, not through distance that judges. John hears the servant in the person of the Word made flesh. He traces the light to a face and to a body. He says that the glory we see is the glory of one who comes near. Keep that in mind. The vision of holiness is not simply a bright, inaccessible throne. It is also a footstep in our streets, a voice that speaks our name. Now the reading grows quiet and longer. Imagine a slow tide washing across the shore of your thought. I will place a few scriptural phrases in that tide, letting them lap against the edges of your awareness. You do not need to catch every line. You only need to let the cadence carry you. Comfort, comfort my people. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. Every valley shall be lifted up, every mountain and hill made low, the uneven ground shall become level. The glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. Let these phrases rest in your mind like stones warmed by the sun. Pause with each image. Breathe into the space it creates. If a memory surfaces, let it be met by the phrase, not chased away. If anxiety rises, let the words hold it gently. John's short witness appears, like a steady lantern placed occasionally along the road. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Each insertion is small. Each insertion is meant to reorient the way you hear the prophetic images. Isaiah offers the map. John supplies the companion who walks the route. We continue deeper into the servant songs. Isaiah names a figure who speaks with restrained dignity, who does not cry aloud, who does not break a bruised reed. Hear those particular words with care. He will not cry aloud, or lift up his voice, or make it heard in the street. The servant's strength is in restraint. He heals by tenderness rather than by overpowering force. Let that picture calm the part of you that believes healing must be loud to be real. John's Gospel interprets that tenderness in the life of Jesus. He speaks of signs and of glory, of a life given and received. Listen to the complement. Isaiah's portrait and John's testimony fit together like two halves of one breath. One shows the form of suffering that saves, the other names the person in whom that saving comes. As we proceed, let the imagery work beneath conscious thought. Picture a valley being smoothed for a traveler. Picture a chute piercing cracked earth. Picture a lamp left burning in a window so a weary friend can find their way home. These are not mere metaphors, they are ways of attending. Allow the metaphors to do what metaphors do best, carry truth in a shape the heart can hold. Now, a longer set of lines about healing and return. Hear them slowly. Those who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Hold the verbs plain. Renew, mount, run, walk. They are bodily. The promise touches muscle and breath in a steady forward movement. John's Gospel brings this home in its insistence that new birth creates a different kind of life, one that is not merely moral reformation, but real, abiding transformation. Another image now. The wilderness blooming like a garden. Isaiah says, "The desert shall rejoice and blossom as the crocus. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice with joy." Picture barren places in your life flowering. Picture small hope becoming vivid color. John hears the flowering and points to a life that bears fruit in the presence of the vine. Let these images move slowly through you. Notice how your breathing matches them when you allow it to. There is no hurry. Let sleep be the gentle outcome of this presence working within you. We will now draw the reading toward the servant's most tender and piercing lines. They are spoken plainly and then repeated in our hearing so that the heart may not flinch from them. Hear them as statements of deep cost and deep love. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Surely he has borne our infirmities and carried our diseases. Consider the plainness of that language. Borne, carried. It is not abstract. It is embodied. The burdens you know are not merely metaphors to a distant God. They are the particular weight that the servant takes upon himself. And yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace. The paradox rests here. In the very act that seemed like defeat, life is given. The prophet does not soften the paradox. He sets it before us and lets the mystery stand. John's Gospel takes up that same paradox and grounds it in the person who is the Word made flesh. John says that to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. There is a relational immediacy here, reception, belonging, the granting of a new identity. Where Isaiah shows the cost and the consequence, John shows the person who offers belonging. You may feel a gentle stirring now, perhaps a memory softening, perhaps a guarded place easing. Let that stirring be received. Do not judge it. Let it be part of the slow work these words do. Now turn with me to a passage of consolation that looks forward to justice made gentle, an image of a shepherd who carries the lamb and leads with a tender hand. Isaiah says, like a shepherd he will tend his flock. He will gather the lambs in his arms and carry them in his bosom. Imagine the intimacy of such tending. Imagine being lifted, not because you failed, but because you are beloved and fragile. John hears the shepherdness and draws it into the person of Jesus, who says he knows his sheep and his sheep know his voice. The recognition is mutual. The shepherd knows, and the sheep hear. Keep breathing. Picture that gathering arm. Let it hold your sleeplessness the way a parent holds a child who cannot yet settle. There is no scolding. There is an attention that is steady and calm. As the night deepens in the reading, Isaiah returns to the theme of restoration. Mountains become level ground. Rivers appear in the desert. The voice declares that what was broken will be mended, though not always in the way we expect. Restoration often begins small, an inner reorientation, a new trust formed in the dark. John's gospel frames that trust as believing, as receiving the life that the word gives freely. A small phrase from John appears now, like a lantern in a long corridor. And the word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have beheld his glory, the glory as of the only Son from the Father. The phrasing is simple and dignified. Let it sit against the images Isaiah has given us. Glory here is not a dazzling display that frightens. It is the revealed character of God in a life lived among people, tender, suffering, steadfast. You may begin to feel the pull of sleep. That is a good sign. The body understands what the mind sometimes resists. Rest is a gift. You are not less for needing it. You are not failing because your thoughts are loud. The gospel permits and dignifies rest. As we near the final stretch of the reading, let the prophetic promises and the Johannine witness braid together in your hearing. Isaiah's maps, trouble named, judgment issued, mercy offered, remnant preserved, servant given, find a home in the person John points to. Listen to this synthesis as if it were a soft refrain. God's holiness exposes what is false. God's mercy restores what is true. Judgment attends to reality. Mercy heals reality. A faithful remnant remains. A servant suffers and thereby redeems. The word becomes flesh to enter the world's thorns and make a passage of life. John's voice is simple about the effect of that entrance. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. There is both a sober note, some do not receive, and a wide invitation, some do. You are not required to have it all together to receive. Reception is a simple posture, to accept, to receive, to belong. Allow these closing images to settle. Breathe in the thought that belonging is offered, not earned. Imagine the small branch again, alive and growing beneath the surface, tended by a presence who knows the cost of becoming human. Let that image be a pillow for your thought. Now, as the reading ends, we step into a short theological quiet, an interpretive benediction that gathers what has been spoken into a single pastoral word. Isaiah's visions were not meant to puzzle you into busyness. They were meant to orient you toward an abiding presence. John gives that presence a name and a face, the Word who is life and light. Hear this as a simple sentence of faith, not an argument. The one Isaiah's scenes point toward is the one John names, the eternal Word who stepped into human life, who stands in our broken places, who draws near to name and to heal. This nearness is not a program. It is a presence. It is the ground on which a weary heart may rest. Rest here for a moment. Let the idea of resting not feel like a task, but like a permission. You are permitted to stop striving for completeness tonight. You are permitted to let the work of tending, of the gentle hand that walks the road with you, continue while you sleep. Faith does not always awake. Sometimes faith is the soft acceptance of a company that will continue the journey. In the final few lines, allow the gospel's invitation to edge into your sleep. John's testimony is an ongoing witness. The Word is with us. The Word is for us. Isaiah's map remains helpful. When holiness feels sharp, let it lead to honesty. When judgment feels heavy, let it lead to mercy. When the world is ruined, look for the remnant. When suffering seems final, listen for a servant who turns sorrow into healing. And so, with these images and phrases in the background, settle your hands. Let your jaw unclench. Permit your eyes to close when they are ready. Let the steady thought that God draws near be the last thing you hold as you drift. May you know tonight the nearness of the one who is both throne and cradle, both justice and mercy, both holiness and tenderness. May the Word that was in the beginning and that was made flesh be a quiet companion to your sleep. May the remnant of faithful hope in you be kept and nourished. May the servant's presence carry the burdens you cannot, and may the light that does not yield to darkness hold your mind in rest. Sleep now, if sleep comes. If it does not, remain in the company of the Word. Either way, the presence that Isaiah's map points to and John's Gospel makes known will not leave you alone. If this time together has helped you to find even a touch of peace, consider subscribing so we might meet again in this gentle way. If you are still awake enough to leave a word, share one small sentence below about what image held you tonight. Go in peace and rest in the nearness of the one who is your true shelter.